Okay, good evening everybody. Thank you very much for dialing in this evening to listen to our student panel webinar. Just before we get started and introduce our panel, I just want to reach out and make sure that people can actually hear us. So if some people could just type in a little yes message to us if they can actually hear what we are saying, that would be great. Okay, brilliant. So now that we know that there's some people out there who can actually hear us, we're going to get started. So I'm just going to begin by introducing our wonderful panel who we have here this evening. So I'm just going to quickly go around and ask you guys just to introduce yourself, just your name, your background, your work experience, and where you're from. That would be great. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Paula. I'm from Auckland, and I was originally a commercial lawyer working at a law firm in Auckland and then working in-house in London.
Hello everyone, I'm Hakim. I'm originally from Malaysia. So previously I worked in the in a R&D department, so back in an agriculture company in Malaysia. So after that I changed roles into a business analyst role. And then, yeah, I'm here doing Oxford MBA.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tom. I'm from Melbourne in Australia, and I've spent the past few years working in startups, both in Melbourne and the UK.
Hello, everyone. My name's Chris. I've spent the last few years in Mongolia setting up an underground copper mine. Prior to that, setting up a couple of mines around Australia with a background in resources and mining.
Okay, thank you. So the main idea behind the webinar this evening is to get some insights from you guys about the journey that you went on in terms of deciding to do an MBA and then how you ended up here in Oxford, and then also covering your experience of the programme so far and anything that you want to highlight to the listeners. So if we could just start by chatting a bit about why you guys were keen to do an MBA, and then anything about the Oxford MBA in particular to you that appealed when you were doing your research around doing the programme.
Sure. So for me, I had worked as a lawyer for about 5 years, but I'd always known that I was quite interested in business. So I was looking to kind of pivot out of doing purely legal work into hopefully more of a business strategy sort of role. So for me, I kind of saw the MBA as a way to upskill myself on some of these more general business areas and hopefully be able to transition in my career. And in terms of Oxford, I was already living in the UK, and so I was interested in staying here for a little bit longer. Obviously, I was really interested in just coming to the university in general because you're kind of part of this really interesting wider community. But also the Oxford MBA program in particular, I just found quite appealing because it seemed like a really interesting, compact one-year course with a really wide range of people from lots of different places, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity to get lots of different perspectives going forward in my career.
Yeah, so for me, I think I did the MBA because I did 2 years in R&D, and then I realized that I need to go into management. So that's why the MBA, and why in the UK and not in the US is probably because of the one-year program in the UK. So you just take a short break from your work, and then you can return back to your job. And why Oxford instead of the other universities in the UK? I think because of the brand that it carries back in my home country, and also it would add to my CV because previously I did my degree at Cambridge, so that's why it makes sense to go to Oxford now. Yeah.
I guess the reason I was looking at doing an MBA is because we spent some time raising some money, and I realized that dealing with the bankers and investors that I was a little bit out of my depth, so I wanted to brush up on my finance skills and things like that and potentially transition into venture capital or impact investing. Like the others, I was interested in a 1-year MBA program rather than a 2-year program. I also wanted to go somewhere in Europe, particularly interested in somewhere with a pretty diverse cohort. So I think we've got about 64 different countries represented in our class this year, and 93% are international. So that was really important for me. And then Oxford in particular, one was the focus on social impact, particularly climate change and environmental issues. Second was the connection with the wider university. So some business schools sit alone and you just interact with people from the business faculty. I think one of the huge benefits of Oxford is that you get to interact with the wider university through the college system, through extracurricular activities, through the Oxford Union. There's kind of all these opportunities to meet people doing all sorts of interesting courses and things like that. So those are the reasons I chose Oxford.
That's a good answer. So I did an MBA to pivot out of my previous role. I'd found that I was stagnating in Mongolia. I didn't really have anything else that I could teach my team. I was supervising 30 of them and they were running the whole show for me. So I decided that I needed to pivot, and I'd sort of hit the ceiling for my current career. So I decided that this would be perfect. That was why I decided on an MBA. Why Oxford was, I think, part of what Hakim said. It was just it's a brand thing. I knew that eventually I'll probably transfer back to Australia, and I know that the Oxford MBA would carry a lot of weight back there, more so than I believe than LBS or some of the other American schools. So yeah, and it's an incredible experience up until now. So I'm not regretting my decision whatsoever.
Thank you. Can I just ask you guys, because obviously something that you will have in common with the people who are dialed in this evening is that you've obviously come quite a far distance to do your MBA. Did any of you have any concerns around that, or did that feed into your thought process at all when you were making your decision about coming so far from home to actually do your MBA?
I mean, from my perspective, so obviously I was living in the UK already. So in terms of that transition, it wasn't difficult. I think for me, the hardest part is I had been living in the UK with my partner and he's now moved back to New Zealand. So it's pretty much as far away as you can possibly get from your partner and your family. So obviously that's really difficult. I think, and that was definitely a really important thing that we had to work through when I was deciding to come here. But I think one of the things that has kind of helped me now that I am here is that there's actually quite a lot of people who are in that same situation. And so you've got quite a network of, you know, people who you can talk to about it if you're having issues or whatever. And I mean, ultimately, I'm making the decision that I'm going back home for the holidays, which is really nice. And, you know, with technology being what it is, Skype and messaging and emailing and all the different types of things, I'm talking to everyone every day. So it's actually not been as hard on the whole as I thought it could have been.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm fortunate enough that I can bring my partner over to the UK. But initially, we did consider two things, like the funding, the money that it's required to come here, and the second thing is the value that you get out from this MBA. So I think by being in the UK or doing it in Oxford, I think the diversity, like what Tom has mentioned, brings value out of the MBA program instead of doing MBA in Malaysia. I mean, compared to doing MBA in my home country, and it's worth it, I think. So that's why we decided to came here.
Yeah, I think what the others have said is correct. It's easy enough to keep up with family back home. But also, I guess something that played into my mind was the fact that Australia is a relatively small market and there's a premium put on experience in larger markets with a diverse group of people, particularly in my field, for example, in impact investing or in venture capital more broadly. You know, the UK is at the cutting edge of that, and it's the field is a lot larger and a lot more advanced than it is in Australia. So you know, that I guess has to be balanced against. I did look at a couple of Australian business schools, but I think you know, the depth of experience here is magnitudes greater.
Yeah, well, there's not much I can say that hasn't already been previously said, but yeah, it is certainly a bit challenging being away from family and friends. But one of the benefits of Oxford, and we'll probably hear about the colleges later on, but the colleges are a big thing here. It really is your second family. And it's difficult to explain until you actually experience it. But having a small clique of group of people that you know, binded together by this single membership of this college, it's it makes everything so much easier. It makes the longing disappear.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit now about your experiences so far. So you're all approaching the end of your first semester on the programme. So I just wanted to ask you if there's anything that you found particularly surprising so far. That can be in a positive way or something that's maybe more challenging than you anticipated, and just anything that's maybe a bit different to what you anticipated before starting on the programme.
So, I mean, in terms of positive surprises, I think the first one for me was, I think, when I was looking at business schools, a lot of what you see is it is quite, or it may be perceived as a really competitive male environment. So the first thing that was like a positive surprise for me is I think 44% of our cohort is female, which has been excellent for me, and I think adds a really good balance to the point of view. And then tying into that as well, I was also really pleasantly surprised that while everyone is really smart and competitive, I feel like no one's competitive against each other. So everyone's been really respectful in class in terms of letting other people share their points of view. So I've been really pleasantly surprised at that. And also I think I've also been quite pleasantly surprised at the way some of the classes have been structured, so that a lot of it's not just kind of lectures like my undergrad was. There's a lot more in terms of interesting activities that we've been doing as well. So I've really enjoyed that side of things. I mean, on the slightly more negative side, it maybe wasn't a surprise that being part of a really old institution like this, there's lots of bureaucracy that you've got to deal with. So I think in terms of, if you do end up coming here, it's just, making sure you factor that into any paperwork you have to do, and those sort of things can be a bit time consuming.
Yeah, for me, I think the positive surprise comes into three forms. Like the first one would be the lecturer, because I expect, from my previous experience, academics are not the best lecturers sometimes. But when coming here, I realized that they are really good in their field, and because of the interactions in classes, which is the second positive surprise, it makes learning very effective and interesting. So you learn a lot more, and the lectures are very good. And the third surprise would be the diversity in terms of the background of the cohort. So I know it's a bit cliche to mention diversity, but then I actually realized when I came here that they are very diverse. My classmates are very diverse. We have people from working in Sotheby's and all startups. So it's just amazing to be here and talking to your classmates.
In terms of positive surprises, I think something that I wasn't particularly thinking much about, but has been a huge factor, is kind of like the magic of Oxford. So the whole idea of going to formal dinners and dressing up in your sub-fusk and matriculating and having your ceremony in Latin and being part, voting at the Oxford Union and that kind of thing. I have friends at INSEAD, LBS, and the schools in Spain, and they often say, what's going on there? Why are you dressed like that? Or, how are you seeing Bob Iger and things like that? So the magic of Oxford is something that I kind of think I wasn't really considering, but everyone's got swept up in and been really enjoying. So that's something that's been really cool.
Yeah, I think for me, something that I've been really pleasantly surprised about was the comparison between this and my undergrad. My undergrad was at QUT in Brisbane. After class, we didn't really hang out together. We were all competing for the same jobs. It was extremely competitive. It was just such a different dynamic. Here, there really is, even though we all know that we're all applying for basically the same jobs, there seems to be absolutely no backstabbing, competitive nature or ill-temperedness, I guess. So that's what I was pleasantly surprised about, how easy-natured and just lovely it is, basically.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So something that some of you have touched on already, and we have had a couple of questions through about as well, is college life and how that's impacted on your experience so far. Could you all just say a little bit maybe about what college you're at, and maybe a little bit about how you came to be at that college, how you kind of chose which college you'd like to be part of, to give people a bit of insight into that.
Sure. So I'm at Queen's College, and I have to say, in terms of choosing it, I had a spreadsheet, I had all sorts of different factors going on, and then in the end it got a little bit overwhelming and I just picked one. So I'm maybe not the best representative of that, but in terms of kind of what college life means for me, so I'm staying in Queen's College accommodation, but it's not, it's off-site accommodation, so it's not at the college itself. So I've maybe, and Chris will tell you about this later because you live on-site, but some people do at Pembroke, don't they? So
No, I'm on Castleville.
okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, I got that completely wrong. But anyway, like I feel like I maybe have, because there are fewer MBAs at my college, I maybe don't have quite as big a network, but it does mean that it is nice to have a few MBAs at your college and then also actually get to interact with people at the rest of the university. So the thing that I have enjoyed about being at Queen's is they have quite a good like social group. They organise lots of dinners and going out for drinks and things like that, which has been really nice. I've also had the opportunity to, while I'm not a hugely sporty person myself, it was really cool getting to go and try rowing and things like that, which you do get the opportunity to do that at most of the colleges, I think. And yeah, I mean, my flatmate is another Queen's College student who is a DPhil in chemistry. So it's been really interesting to kind of learn about what he does and just have this different perspective and get out of the MBA bubble a little bit, because it is a thing and we're all kind of frantically busy doing that all the time. So it's nice to take a little bit of a step back and kind of appreciate a bit more about the wider university, I think.
So the criteria that I use to choose colleges is based on your approximate distance from the city centre. But unfortunately, I did not get my first choice of college, so I was sent to St. Hugh's. But it's amazing nonetheless. But it's a bit far from the city centre. But for me, I think because I live outside of the college, so I don't really spend time at my college except for formal dinners, which are amazing because the food is delicious. But the hall is quite modern at St. Hugh's. And apart from that, I think I spend time at my college for sporting activities. So I'm part of the college football team. So it's good. It's a good way to de-stress yourself during weekends. And I think for me, at least as a business student, I spend most of my time in the business school instead of my college.
I was the same, like a good MBA student. I had a spreadsheet of colleges that tried to weight things based on distance from the centre, how many MBAs, how old it was, the size of the endowment, the quality of the food, the number of whiskies in the bar. There are lots of different criteria you can use to pick the college, but I would say the number one thing is that pretty much everyone ends up loving their college for their own reasons, no matter what college they got in, whether it was their first preference or not. So it's something that a lot of people ask lots of questions about, but really at the end of the day, wherever you end up, all the colleges are unique, interesting, and beautiful. I'm at Trinity College. I was late in the third round. I picked my college, so I actually didn't have much of a choice, but very happy with Trinity. There's only 2 MBAs, which was part of the reasons I chose it, so that, again, I get to mix with a different group of people. I have a partner, so they don't have graduate accommodation for couples, so I live privately, and that's something, again, to consider. Your experience will be different if you live on site or off site, whether you have a family or whether you're single and all that kind of stuff. And in terms of, I'm similar, like I eat at the college fairly often because the food's good, and everyone wants to do formal dinner at all the different colleges. So that's probably where I spend most of my time there, but have also kind of got involved with the MCR, which is like the group of graduates, the middle common room, and use the library sometimes as well.
For me, I was completely different from these other 3. I was late in the 4th round. I didn't get a choice. I was assigned to Pembroke, and I'm extremely happy with my selection. it's Pembroke's great college. It's right in the city centre. It's not quite one of the oldest, but it's definitely one steeped in history, and it's a really, really amazing. Really, it's one of the main huge pluses of this whole MBA degree. It's just the college is wonderful and fantastic, and I did not do a spreadsheet at all. And yeah, I was very, very happy with my with where I was put. So yeah.
Well, I can tell you guys the spreadsheet is very popular based on the questions that are coming in. We have had some requests for you to share the spreadsheets, and we probably recommend that people do their own. There's probably value in doing your own research if you are thinking of coming, so we won't ask the panel to share their spreadsheets with you, but they've given you some good ideas about the types of things that they considered on the spreadsheet. Some of you guys have mentioned some things that you do in connection with your colleges, so somebody mentioned sport. Is there anything else that you guys, just to give the audience more of an idea of the other things that college life adds to your experience here?
Lots of drinking. Yeah, the middle common room pub bar is amazing. 1 pound pints, 2 pound whiskies. Yeah, not advocating like drinking to excess, but it's a lot of fun. It's amazing social atmosphere. They do mindfulness walks, movie nights, bops, which are just like parties. Yeah, it's great fun. Other than that, sport. Yeah, if you're into rowing, go for Pembroke.
Anybody else involved in anything?
Yeah, I mean, ours is similar. We do weekly, every Tuesday night, we have a pizza night at the MCR. We do formal dinners. This week we have Xmas dinner on Sunday night, which is like a big roast. You get crackers and Christmas hats. The choir sings before and between courses. What else do we do at the college?
Actually, that's another thing. So I don't think any of us are involved in this. If you're into music, that's something you can do a lot through the college as well. So I know that my college has an amazing choir, and they sing every week at Evensong at the chapel service. And quite a few colleges have quite a big emphasis on music. So that's something you can definitely be involved in as well.
Any of you had access maybe to any, I know that obviously there's a lot of speakers who come to the business school itself, but obviously you also have access to people across the wider university. Is that something that any of you have tapped into as yet?
That's you.
Well, yeah.
You're always at the union.
Yeah, I mean, the Oxford Union obviously is something that's probably unique to Oxford versus any other university in the world. So there are lots of speakers that come. It's a debating society. It's a beautiful old building with a great bar and library. When you join the business school, you get an automatic lifetime membership to the Oxford Union. I've been and seen Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, Calvin Klein.
Wow.
This year they've also had the journalist who broke the Harvey Weinstein story, Theresa May. They've had debates on Brexit, on Kashmir, on Trump, on climate change. Yeah, it's a pretty incredible lineup of speakers, soccer players, movie stars, whoever you want to see. I'm also a member of the School of Climate Change, so it's another extracurricular activity. So we probably not, it's a little bit more nerdy, but there are some very cool climate change speakers that we've got to see, people who are kind of leading their fields. And there are lots of people who are in different co-curricular activities, like Finance Lab, Impact Lab, and they all bring in really interesting speakers from their different disciplines. The other one I'm involved with is the Oxford Foundry, which is the kind of startup and entrepreneurship centre for the whole university. And again, they bring in CEOs. They had Tim Cook from Apple open the centre. They've had the CEO of Onfido. I can't remember who else, but there are lots of interesting entrepreneurs come and speak there as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Hakim.
No, just apart from that, like if you're not involved in anything, like if you don't have any memberships to any schools, there are always free events or free talks that's happening around Oxford. So if you just sign up to Eventbrite app, you can see a lot of talks that you won't miss out on anything, and you will always be busy throughout your year here.
Yeah, that's something I did want to ask, just with the list of things that you guys have mentioned. How have you found balancing the intensity of the programme with all of these other amazing opportunities that you have available to you while you're here?
It's really hard because on any given night there's like 5 different things you can go to. So, I mean, there's more than that, but you know, there's at least 5 different things that people you know are going to. So I think it's kind of about having a little bit of an idea before you start of what sort of things you're most interested in yourself. So like, for example, I wanted to get some kind of practical experience. So I have joined the Oxford Strategy Group and then the Creative Disruption Lab, which is, again, consulting with like tech startup companies, particularly around AI. So those were kind of the groups that I've joined. And then also someone actually gave me some advice that was effectively like, you know, book up, you know, 60% of your time, but make sure you leave like maybe 30 or 40% of your time to actually be a bit more flexible and go to really cool and exciting things when they come up, because you'll hear about things the day before and think, oh my gosh, that's the most amazing thing ever. So I think it's kind of leaving yourself a little bit of flexibility, and then obviously making sure that you kind of listen to your body a little bit, and if you need to sleep, just don't go to something and go and sleep, because it's actually no good to you if you get sick, because I know I've definitely already been sick because it's cold and there's people from 64 different countries with germs, and so you get sick. So you do need to be a little bit good to your body.
Yeah, I think that's actually good advice, because initially when I came here, I wanted to try so many things, like finance, consulting at the same time. But I think once you get here, you'll be overwhelmed with too many talks, events, or anything. So you have to decide on based on your interest, and just go to the ones that you want to go. Yeah, I mean, you don't have that herd mentality where your friends go to something and then you just follow suit just because they're going. It's not, I think it won't do good to your body, and I think priority is important. Yeah, you have to prioritize which events you like to go.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the trade-offs of doing a 1-year MBA. People are finding that you know, you have a lot less time, everything's compressed. So in terms of, you know, your learning and your study, it's all fairly accelerated. And then on top of that, being part of Oxford, there's just so many opportunities to do things, so that compounds it even further. So there's no magic silver bullet. You just have to, you know, do your best to juggle things. But I think most people optimize for taking on a little bit extra, because there's just, you know, there's so many kind of once in a lifetime experiences, and you try and do your best to soak them up.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to get on to some questions that we've had through in a second, but just before we do, just finally want to ask you if you have any advice for anybody who's dialed in who is considering applying to do the MBA. This can be absolutely anything that was helpful to you guys in terms of when you were making your application, or anything you wish you'd done before you started the course, anything, any advice that you could give out.
I think it's important just to have a proper think about why you want to do it, because different people have different reasons that they want to do an MBA, and a 1-year course may or may not be the right thing for you, depending on if you want to do a lot of exploring, then we don't have a lot of time to do that as such. You do just have to kind of get on and do it. And kind of related to that, once you do make the decision to do it, I think what I wish I maybe had have done a little bit more before I started is a bit more research into, you know, where I might want to be afterwards, just because you don't get, because there's so much other stuff going on, you don't get as much time as you would have liked to do, you know, research into potential jobs and things like that. And the resources here are amazing, and the career centre is amazing, but you're just very time poor. So the more kind of that sort of stuff you can do before you get here, the better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might be jumping a step further. Like, once you have decided to do your MBA, I think it's good if you could think about the timeline of applying for a visa, doing the health screening, and if you are planning to do GMAT, I mean, if it's not too late. For me, it helps to do the course for GMAT so that you can get a higher score for GMAT. I mean, it helps if you want to apply to consulting, I think. So I think, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific on the GMAT in the application. I definitely echo those thoughts about taking the time to do the careers prep work and to have a think about what you want to get out of it before you come here. It's like it's actually essential. I actually had job interviews this week, and it's week 7 or something. Some of the people who are applying to consulting or investment banking have already gone through the whole process in the first 4 weeks of class. So kind of having an idea and going through all the careers work is super important. From a really practical perspective, doing the Wall Street prep course before you come is also gonna be a huge help, because the first term we have business, finance, and accounting, and for those who haven't done it before, the Wall Street prep is a really good way to get a leg up on that and save you a lot of stress. And finally, the other practical thing is if it's possible, I would recommend arriving in Oxford a couple of weeks early at the very least. As mentioned, things happen a little bit slowly here. So getting your bank accounts, your phone, all that stuff sorted is really important, but it's also, more importantly, a great opportunity to meet your classmates and hang out and make some friends before you start, to get to know the city, to get to know the business school, to meet your college, all that kind of stuff. And it just makes the first orientation week, the launch program, way smoother.
Yeah, I think the only real thing that I would add on to there, if you've even got an inkling or an idea that you want to get interested in finance, I would highly recommend the finance lab. But tack on to that, definitely the Wall Street prep. I've never done accounting before, so I had to spend 3 months studying accounting to get into finance lab, and it was well worth it.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to some questions that we've had sent through from some of our listeners. Thank you to everybody who has sent us through some questions. I should say some of the questions are kind of asking for comparisons between the Oxford MBA and MBAs offered at other schools, and we should probably start by saying that nobody here has done an MBA at another school, so it's very difficult for us to actually give a comparison to you. So I might just kind of edit some of the questions slightly, because obviously we can't actually compare to the programs that are offered elsewhere. Some of you have just touched on this, but we did have one question through in regards to job recruiting, so asking what your experiences have been like so far in terms of job recruiting at the business school.
So one of the things that is important to do before you start is they'll send you through some modules and things to do, and they ask you to do a CV that they put into a CV book that gets sent out to some employees beforehand. And I've had personal experience of it's actually incredibly important to make sure this is good, because I had someone reach out to me through the CV book, ended up having an interview and had a job offer, which is so incredibly exciting. So I think making sure that you actually engage in that process is really important. The school's really good at bringing lots of different types of things out. In particular, I was looking at consulting, so I know they're quite strong in that. I don't know if other people had different experiences there.
Yeah, I agree with Paula regarding the CV book. I think it's important because we tend to get offers from recruiters looking at the CV book. And another thing to mention is that I think it's good if you can take the initiative beforehand and just not rely on the careers office, because I think a lot of applications to jobs, a lot of the effort comes from yourself instead of the career office.
In terms of recruiting, basically the way it works is the school brings a huge number of employers to campus. So Thursday nights and Fridays, there's often lots of different employers visiting. A lot of the larger names that are often popular with MBAs, like McKinsey, Boston, Bain, Amazon, Google, Facebook. I think Facebook's here today, Uber, what's the other people? Finance. So we've had, Finance Lab in particular, but separate to that, I think JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, UBS, so basically they bring everyone to the school. Often there's a specific Oxford way to apply. So they have a specific link for Oxford students. They have specific deadlines for Oxford students. So they really do tailor their recruiting to the school, which I guess gives you an idea of how highly they regard it. So for the bigger programs like that, the school brings heaps of people to come and meet with you. And then for the smaller stuff, as in like if you want to work at a startup or something that's maybe less traditional, there's still lots of support because there are specific careers people for each industry, really.
I think the only thing that I probably add on to there is, yes, we do have a lot of employers coming, but it's difficult to understand it. But once you get here, there's 330 other people with an Oxford MBA, which makes it quite competitive when 80 people are going for one job. I would probably just tack on to that if before you come here, make sure that you get involved extracurricularly. Don't just rely on your past work experience. Go do some volunteering. Go volunteer at any. Just get out there and do what you can, because anything that's going to differentiate you from the rest of the cohort is really going to play in your favour later on.
Actually, the other thing that might be worth mentioning is in terms of the careers team and how they support you to do well in the recruiting processes. They do things like, if you have got an interview coming up, you can book in to do like a practice interview session with them and things like that. They do lots of CV support workshops, lots of interview support workshops. So they really are, I mean, it's important for the school for us to all get jobs at the end. So they really are trying to help us do that.
Thank you. So we've had some questions through kind of more around the academic nature of the programme, I guess. So a question about the teaching style on the Oxford MBA. And would you want to say a little bit about that? Maybe does the style vary depending on the class you're in? Is it different to what you anticipated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does vary based on subject. I think we'll all have good examples that we can look back on the last couple of subjects. Technology and operations was run by this brilliant professor that we all loved, and it was very interactive, and it was case study based and amazing. And some of the others are not like that. Not in a negative way, but they're just a bit different. It is very intense. You never really have enough time to do your readings. You never really have enough time to do all the prep that you'd like for every subject, every session. But yeah, it's quite intense. It's quite intense.
Maybe one thing to add is that the lectures are done, at least in first term, in sections. So there's 330 odd MBAs. It's broken up into 4 different sections. So you're in a class of sort of, I don't know what, 60 to 80 people or something like that. Yeah, some of them are case-based, some of them are kind of more academic style. There's a real range of different ways of teaching. Yeah, very different.
And just compared to your undergrad, I know for me at least, and I suspect this is for most people, the number of contact hours you have is way more than you're used to. So we are having, we don't quite have always lectures all day, every day, but effectively we've got 6 hours of lectures 4 days a week. So you're in class a lot. Yeah. So be prepared for that. And this is why it also makes it difficult once you've got all your extracurriculars to do all your prep work. So
I think to be an accredited MBA program, you need to do 500 contact hours. And that's obviously designed for a 2-year program. So you can imagine for a 1-year program, you still have to do the same number of contact hours, but squeeze it into a year.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other, just kind of connected to that, we've had a question too as well about the exam style on the programme. So if the exams, are they practical tasks? Are they written exams? I know you guys have only done one set of exams so far, but if you could just give a bit of insight into that.
I mean, they're different for every subject. The ones we've done so far we had 3 different subjects and we had to write an essay that tied all 3 of them in together. So that was organisational behaviour, technology and operations, and accounting. And then we also had a separate accounting exam, which was just a numerical one. This term, I understand we've got, or this half of the term, a marketing strategy assignment, a business finance exam, which I assume is mostly numerical, although it could be written as well. And then analytics, which presumably will be numerical as well. So I actually don't know how long the exams are this time around. The accounting one was 2.
It was 1.5.
An hour and a half.
The next one's
These
2.
ones are 2. Yeah.
So it's similar to what you said about the teaching side, it just varies depending on
The only difference is the exams. There's two different types of assessment, and the exams are run by Oxford University rather than the business school. So they're very formal and inflexible. So you have to wear your sub-fusk, which is like your Harry Potter outfit, to the exams. There's a whole lot of basically rules and stuff, which actually makes it quite interesting, but that's the only difference.
Also, just to add, I think apart from the assignments, we also have presentations that we have to do in study groups. So I think that helps to build like some sort of teamwork across the study group, and also it helps your presentation skills for career later on.
Okay, thank you. We've also had some questions through in connection to some of the labs connected with the programme. So Paula, I know you mentioned already that you're involved with the Creative Destruction Lab. Could you just say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the Creative Destruction Lab is something that they're running for the first time at Oxford this year. I believe the program's initially started in Canada. So basically what it is imagine kind of, I suppose, Dragon's Den sort of situation. So what it is there is some new startups who are trying to establish companies who have been selected to be part of the program. And then they have, basically through the program, they have access to professional business mentors who have a lot of experience mostly working with startups and those sorts of companies, and then also there's some kind of professional people with science expertise as well because of the AI nature of all the companies. And then we are kind of the student layer. And so the idea is that the companies are getting advice from the business mentors, but they're also working with the students to effectively get the students to do some consulting work for them with whatever they need to do. So basically in Michaelmas, what we've done so far is from the student perspective, is we've been given some workshops where we've talked about startups. We've talked about being given some more information about AI and so from kind of a business perspective, but also from an actual computer science perspective, which has been really interesting. And then we've had the first session so far. So basically, we didn't have a huge role in this. It was incredibly interesting for us to sit there and watch. So the businesses met with the mentors in the morning and kind of got some advice from them, and then the Dragon's Den happened where the business came in and all of the different mentors were talking about it, and we got to sit there and watch them and really learn a lot about what they were looking for and what might be a successful company. And then they voted at the end of the day on which companies stayed in and which didn't. And then moving into next term, we're then going to get to select which of the companies that are still left in the program that we want to work with, and then actually get to work with them to kind of help them develop their business plans and things like that. So, and that will be tailored to the needs of the company themselves. So I think we'll be in groups of 2 or 3 students per company, and then they'll kind of continue through the process and we have to present to them at the end.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So hopefully that gives a bit more insight into that. And we've also had a question through about Finance Lab. Anybody involved in Finance Lab?
Yeah.
So just can you talk a little bit about it and your experiences of it so far?
Absolutely. Without a finance background, it's been quite a steep learning curve for me. So we'll do a case study every week. We're split into sections. Each section will normally have an employer visit. One of the rules is that they'll only do a case study with someone that's worked on it in the room, which has been really fascinating. So we had BAML in the other week, a Bank of America Merrill Lynch. They were talking about the IPO launch of Ferrari. That was fascinating. We had Morgan Stanley come in and talk about the merger of Sky Comcast, which was fascinating. It's been very challenging in terms of trying to get the hours. The contact hours for Finance Lab are quite extreme. So we'll generally be working till late at night, at least once or twice a week. But it's been really, really enjoyable. It's been good having that exposure to the I guess probably the finance language, which I don't have I've never had any exposure to. And these employers that come along are very interesting, and learning a lot about private equity and things that I've never really heard of. So I would highly recommend, even if you're not even close to interested in finance, that you do the finance lab. In my opinion, I think it's well worthwhile.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Really good question here related to electives. So I know you haven't started your electives yet, but someone's just asked if you could talk a little bit about some of the electives that you've opted for and how you chose them in terms of them being aligned with your post-MBA goals.
Has any of you actually?
Has anybody made a choice?
Yeah. We haven't actually made a choice.
So the first in Michaelmas and the first part of Hillary, the first 2 terms, we have core subjects, so accounting, finance, strategy, marketing, etc. And then we choose our electives after that for the rest of Hillary term and Trinity term. I can say that, like, historically, we know some have been very popular. So there are some overseas electives that happen between Hillary and Trinity. One to South Africa, which has got amazing reviews. I think there's a digital marketing track to New York, fintech track to London, and then I think, speaking to people, there's a real mix. Like, some people know exactly what they want to do, and they will choose electives based on that. Others will choose, for example, they might not want to do finance, but they want to challenge themselves, so they'll do corporate valuation and business finance extensions and things like that. And then there are lots of also electives which I guess are, again, probably unique to Oxford. So there's one called Leading from the Humanities, which has been very popular in the past, where they get lecturers from all different faculties around the university to talk about leadership through their own perspectives and lenses. There's a negotiations class, which always sounds like it's pretty full, entrepreneurial finance, which talks about how to raise money as a startup. So there are a heap of different electives. I think there's 30 or 40 to choose from, and there's a heap of different strategies, whether you want to pick a really, focused path. If you want to go into digital marketing, and there's probably 10 different marketing electives you can do, or whether you want to just pick a range of different things and try stuff out.
Great, thank you guys very much. We have another question. This probably goes back a bit more, I think, to when you guys were going through the application process. I'm guessing this is what this refers to. So someone's asked if you have any advice for the required essay that's part of the application process.
I can't remember.
That feels like a really long time ago.
What is the question this year? It would be, because I think it was a slightly different process that we had to go through than it is this year.
So I think this year, I think so. This year you do still write just a short 250-word essay, but it's just anything that you want to tell the committee about yourself in addition to what you've already written about in your application. You guys didn't have that?
I think we did actually.
We had 2 essays.
One was statistics or something.
Yeah, we had one that was tell us about a statistic that shocks you and why. And then we had the 250-word one, which was tell us anything. The only thing that I remember that surprised me a little bit was there's also a bunch of short answer questions, which are really effectively mini essays. I think they're 200 words each that tell us about your career, tell us about why Oxford, tell us about this and that. They're all in the actual application. So I think it ends up being there's the 2 main essays, or there were the 2 main essays, but then also quite a lot of work getting your career narrative sorted and, kind of lining up what you want to do next and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think in the tell us about yourself thing, I think I wrote about, and it's been a while since I did this, obviously, but I'm pretty sure I kind of talked about why, kind of harking back to that first question of why did I want to move across the world, be away from my family and actually do this. And I think it's kind of reflecting a little bit more about what this experience actually means to you and kind of make it as personal as you can, because I think they're wanting to see that you're not just, replicating the rote learned reason for why you might want to do an MBA. They actually are quite interested in what you bring to the table, and I think that's kind of why they try and deliberately curate such a diverse class, is because they want people with lots of interesting and different points of view. So I think to the extent that you can bring that across, and that, you know, anything extra part, like anything extra that you've done in your life that kind of gives you a unique perspective on something, that's probably a good thing to think, a good place to start.
Yeah, and we should say to everyone listening that there is a new element to the application process this year, which is that there is an online assessment that you will do as part of your application process as well. So it will vary slightly from what these guys have been through when they were applying to come on the programme. We have a couple of questions that are very region specific. So we have someone who's asked what colleges are good for Aussies. I don't know.
All colleges are good for Aussies. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. There's, I will say, there's an Australian and New Zealand group within the MBA. You know, we've had dinners together and things like that. There's also an Australian and New Zealand society, which is a university-wide society that hosts pub nights, like mixes with different like disciplines. I can't remember some of the other events. I also play on the Australian rules football team. So there's a men's and women's team as well that play Australian rules football, and they train once a week. We had a round robin tournament against Cambridge and South Wales a couple of weeks ago. It's really good fun. So there's a fair Australian community, but I don't think there's no college in particular that is like known for one nationality or another. The whole point of them is that they're very mixed and diverse.
Great, thank you. And then one specific to Asia. So we have a question through, if you're looking at a career in Asia, do you think an Oxford degree is relevant?
Like I think especially in Asia, the brand of Oxford resonates well with most companies, with most multinational companies. So I think in terms of number one is the brand. The second thing is the diversity community here. So you get that European context before you head back to the Asia region. So obviously you get to learn like even a bit. I mean, you get to learn how things work here, and you can implement it back in Asia. So I think that really helps to do your MBA outside of Asia, get out of the norm that you have. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Somebody, again, I think we may have covered this a little bit, and it might not be something that any of you guys can chat about, but we've had someone ask how strong you think Oxford is in terms of the tech startup industry.
So, I mean, I'm part of the Oxford Seed Fund, so that's a student-led investment fund, which is fairly unique to MBA schools. Essentially, that means that we're a group of 11 students who invest each year into tech startups, early stage startups coming out of Oxford. Yeah, we went to Finland last week. We're in Helsinki for a big tech conference. Was it in terms of how strong is it to tech startups? I mean, it depends what you call a tech startup. Like the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc., all come here to recruit students. I think last year Amazon was actually the biggest employer of MBAs from the cohort. For smaller tech startups, the Oxford brand is very strong. We've obviously been meeting a lot of them through the seed fund. I think that's one of the things you find is that when you have put Oxford on your LinkedIn and then start adding people, the requests that people accept very readily. So yeah, and through the Foundry as well, they have their own incubators and stuff like that. VCs come to the demo day, so there's a pretty strong link with the tech startup community here. We also did a tech startup speed dating night on Tuesday night where a heap of companies that had spun out of the university using university IP came and then met a whole lot of MBAs, and we just literally went around and introduced ourselves to them. Lots of them were hiring, lots of them were interested in getting us for strategic consulting projects or entrepreneurship projects or internships over the summer. So yeah, I'd say relatively strong.
And I guess to support that, if you are the person looking to start up your own tech startup, there's lots of support there in terms of they have things like the ideation lab and things like that, where they're kind of encouraging people to come up with ideas. We've also obviously got things like where, specific classes that do kind of talk about entrepreneurship and things like that. So I think there's definitely learnings there for people wanting to be a tech startup person. as well. And then obviously things like Creative Destruction Lab is a really good opportunity to see some of these sorts of things in action, network with some other people who are engaging in really early stage tech startups as well. So I think that there's definitely support there from that perspective as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so I think what you've both chatted about there has definitely answered the questions that have come through. So that's great. So we'll finish up. I think we've just got a couple of minutes left to go. Somebody has sent in quite a wide-ranging question. That is probably a nice big rabbit. So they've said anything else to talk about, which I'm guessing they're just asking, is there anything to sum up a message that you want to put out there to anybody who's listening this evening, who's maybe considering applying to do the programme? No. No is the answer.
It's very broad. I think one thing that we maybe didn't really touch on as much was kind of the thing that I really have liked about this program is that the whole learning experience that you've got, it's not just you in a classroom, you're not alone. It's really well structured in terms of, grouping us into kind of parts of the cohort to do classes together, so you manage to meet people. Like obviously 300 people is a lot of people. They group us into groups of 80 and then groups of 6 as our study group, and it gives you a real opportunity to have a little bit of support network with other people, have really good discussions, get help if you need it, and so I think the kind of community that you get here I think is really important, and I think that's probably one of the best things about the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really think it feels like you're studying in Hogwarts, like in Harry Potter. It feels like that, and I think it's worth mentioning also that the extracurricular activities like the consulting clubs, you are interested, they actually work with local companies, with actual companies that you can advise on. So those are some of the extra things that you can do outside of your classes.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to for all the people who are coming from Australia and New Zealand and Asia, I think one of the things that is worth considering is the Oxford brand that you get by being associated with the university. So as Chris mentioned at the start, business schools aren't necessarily all that well known back home, but the Oxford brand is, so I think it carries a lot of weight. The experience is amazing. There are certainly some things about it being a one-year program and things like that that you should take into account. But if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for a one-year program, I think you'd find it hard to find something better.
Brilliant. So I just want to finish up by saying thank you very much to our panel for contributing and giving us their insights, and for everyone who listened, thank you very much for sending in your questions. We will send a link to a recording of the webinar as well, so for anybody who wasn't able to dial in, hopefully the information that you'll be able to listen to will be useful for all of you. So enjoy your evening and the rest of your weekend, and thank you very much for listening.